Today, America pauses in quiet reflection for distinct voices for different paths. Now united by silence, each of them shaped a corner of the nation's cultural memory. Through words that challenged power, music that carried freedom across open roads, performances that redefined television, and stories that invited audiences to imagine a hopeful future. Their lives unfolded in different worlds, yet all left marks that will outlive headlines and breaking news. As the lights dim on another chapter of American history, we are reminded that legacy is not measured by time alone, but by impact. In this hour, we remember for legendary Americans we lost today, not to dwell on loss, but to honor what they gave, what they stood for, and why their names will continue to echo long after the final frame fades to black. The news arrived quietly in the early hours of December 16, 2025, confirming that a long and influential voice in American thought had fallen silent. Norman Harold Podhoretz had died at the age of 95, closing a chapter that stretched across nearly a century of debate, belief, and intellectual struggle for many. His name was inseparable from ideas that shaped modern political conversation. For others, he was a figure of controversy, but to ignore his impact would be to overlook how deeply words can move a nation. Norman Harold Podhoretz was born on January 16, 1930, in Brooklyn, New York, the son of Jewish immigrants who believed strongly in education, discipline, and hard work. His early life was shaped by books, debate, and a deep desire to understand the world around him. From a young age, he showed an uncommon gift for language and argument, earning recognition for his sharp mind and ambition. Teachers noticed it early, so did his peers. He attended Columbia University, where his academic talent quickly set him apart. Podhoretz thrived in an environment where ideas mattered, where arguments were not avoided but encouraged. He later studied at Cambridge, further refining his intellectual voice. In these years, he leaned toward liberal thought, embracing the post-war optimism that defined much of American academic life at the time. He believed in progress, reason, and moral responsibility. That belief would later evolve, but it never disappeared. In 1960, at just 30 years old, Podhoretz became editor-in-chief of Commentary magazine, a position he would hold for 35 years. It was a role that placed him at the center of America's most intense cultural and political debates. Under his leadership, the magazine became more than a publication. It became a battleground of ideas. At Commentary, Podhoretz encouraged writers to challenge accepted views, even when it made readers uncomfortable. He believed that intellectual honesty mattered more than popularity. Over time, his own views shifted. Disillusioned by what he saw as moral weakness in liberal politics, he moved toward a form of conservatism that later came to be known as neoconservatism. He once described himself as a paleo-neoconservative, noting that he had arrived at these beliefs long before the label existed. This shift was not sudden. It was gradual, shaped by events such as the Vietnam War, cultural unrest, and changes within American universities. Podhoretz did not see his transformation as betrayal, but as growth. In his writing, he argued that ideas must respond to reality, not ideology alone. Supporters admired his courage, critics accused him of abandoning his roots. Yet even his critics acknowledged his clarity. Podhoretz wrote with force but also with structure. His essays were direct, carefully argued, and emotionally restrained. He believed that emotion had a place in ideas, but discipline mattered more. His books, including Making It and Why We Were in Vietnam, reached audiences far beyond academic circles. He was not writing only for scholars. He was writing for the nation. A former colleague once reflected, Norman believed ideas could shape history. He treated words like tools, not ornaments. That belief guided every stage of his career. As the Cold War progressed and later ended, Podhoretz remained a strong voice in debates about American power and moral leadership. He argued that the United States had a responsibility to defend democratic values, even when it was costly or unpopular. His views on foreign policy were firm, sometimes controversial, but always rooted in a sense of historical consequence. During the 1980s and 1990s, his influence reached its height. Politicians read him, think tanks quoted him, supporters saw him as a moral compass, critics saw him as rigid, but few denied that he shaped the language of political debate. He was not a man who sought comfort in consensus. His family life remained largely private, but those close to him described a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. Podhoretz was married to writer Midge Decter, herself a strong intellectual presence. Together, they formed a partnership defined by conversation, disagreement, and mutual respect. Their home, friends recalled, was filled with books and argument, but also loyalty. In later years, Podhoretz stepped back from public debate, allowing a new generation of thinkers to take the stage. Still, His ideas lingered. Writers who disagreed with him often found themselves responding to his arguments long after he stopped publishing regularly. Influence, in his case, did not fade with silence when news of his death spread. Reactions were measured but sincere. A former editor wrote online, "You didn't have to agree with Norman Podhoretz to learn from him. He demanded seriousness. In an age that often avoids it," another commentator noted. He reminded us that ideas have consequences and that words can shape policy for better or worse. Even critics offered respect. One academic posted, "Podhoretz forced clarity. In arguing against him, you had to sharpen your own thinking." It was perhaps the highest compliment an intellectual adversary could give. His passing marks more than the loss of a single voice. It marks a quiet closing of an era when magazines, essays, and long arguments played a central role in national life. Podhoretz belonged to a generation that believed ideas deserve time, space, and seriousness. In today's faster world, that belief feels distant, yet his legacy remains. Norman Podhoretz showed that intellectual life could matter beyond classrooms. He proved that writing could influence power, and that belief, when carefully argued, could endure decades of change. He did not seek to please everyone. He sought to be clear, consistent, and honest as he saw it. In remembering him, America remembers a time when debates were long, words were chosen carefully, and ideas were treated as forces capable of shaping history. His life reminds us that thought itself can be a form of action. As the final pages turn on his story, what remains is the echo of arguments made, questions raised, and convictions held firmly to the end. Norman Harold Podhoretz will be remembered, not just for what he believed, but for his insistence that beliefs matter, and that the written word, when taken seriously, can leave a lasting mark on a nation's conscience. The confirmation came softly, without spectacle, on the morning of December 16, 2025. Gilbert Cyril Gerard had passed away, and with that news, a familiar face from television's hopeful future quietly slipped into history. For many viewers, his presence had once been a steady light on the screen, calm, reassuring, always looking forward. Gilbert Cyril Gerard was born and raised in Arkansas, far from the bright lights of Hollywood and the futuristic worlds he would later help bring to life. His early years were shaped by discipline, faith, and a strong sense of responsibility. Family and friends recalled a young man who listened more than he spoke, who observed the world closely, and who carried himself with quiet purpose. These traits would later become part of his on-screen identity. As a teenager, Gerard showed an interest in performance, not as a search for fame, but as a way to tell stories. He was drawn to characters with inner strength rather than loud confidence. After leaving home, he worked steadily, taking small roles and learning the craft from the ground up. It was not an easy path, but it was a patient one. Television in the late 20th century was changing rapidly. Audiences were searching for stories that offered escape, but also hope. Science fiction, once seen as niche, began to reach wider homes. It was during this shift that Gerard found his defining role. When he appeared as Captain William Buck Rogers, he brought something rare to the genre. He did not play the character as distant or untouchable. Instead, he offered warmth, restraint, and moral clarity. His Buck Rogers was a leader who listened, a hero who felt human. For viewers living through uncertain times, that mattered. A television critic later wrote, "Gilbert Gerard made the future feel safe. You believed his character would do the right thing, even when the world around him was unknown." That trust became central to his appeal. The show reached audiences across generations. Children saw adventure, adults saw steadiness. Gerard's performance never demanded attention, yet it held it. He understood that science fiction worked best when the humanity came first. Behind the scenes, colleagues described him as professional and kind. He arrived prepared, treated crew members with respect, and avoided drama. One co-star shared in a recent tribute, "Gilbert was exactly who he appeared to be on screen, calm, thoughtful, and generous with his time." In an industry known for ego, that consistency stood out. Though Buck Rogers became his most recognizable role, Gerard continued to work in television and film, taking on parts that suited his grounded presence. He never chased trends. Instead, he chose roles that felt honest to him. That choice limited his visibility at times, but it preserved his sense of self. Away from the camera, Gerard lived quietly. He valued privacy and family, preferring a life away from constant attention. Friends recalled dinners filled with conversation rather than stories of fame. He remained connected to his roots, returning to Arkansas often and supporting local causes without seeking recognition. As years passed, new generations discovered his work through reruns and online platforms. Messages from fans continued to arrive, many expressing gratitude rather than admiration. One viewer wrote, Watching him as Buck Rogers made me believe the future could be kind. Another shared, he was my first hero, not because he was strong, but because he was calm. In later life, Gerard stepped back from acting, content with what he had given. He watched the genre evolve, seeing new versions of science fiction take shape. Though technology advanced, fans often noted that something from earlier stories felt missing. It was not the effects, it was the tone, the quiet confidence Gerard embodied. When news of his death spread, tributes were measured and heartfelt. A former producer posted, "Gilbert Gerard represented a kind of hero we don't see often anymore. One who led by example, not force." Social media filled with clips, still images, and memories shared across decades. His passing on December 16, 2025, felt symbolic to many. The year itself had been marked by change and loss, and Gerard's death seemed to close a door on a gentler vision of the future. Yet it also reminded viewers of what storytelling once offered: reassurance, balance, and hope. Gilbert Gerard's legacy is not defined by the number of roles he played, but by how those roles made people feel. He helped shape a moment in television when the future was imagined not as something to fear, but something to prepare for with courage and care. In remembering him, audiences remember evenings spent in front of the television, watching a hero who spoke softly and stood firmly. They remember a time when optimism was written into the script and humanity guided the plot. As the final credits roll on his life, Gilbert Cyril Gerard is remembered as more than an actor. He's remembered as a symbol of reassurance, a steady presence in an uncertain world, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful heroes are the ones who lead quietly, always looking toward a better tomorrow. The news spread quietly across Texas in December 2025, carried more by feeling than by headlines. Joe Eli had passed away, and with him went a voice that had traveled countless back roads, small towns, and open highways. For many, it felt like losing a companion who had been there through long drives and late nights. The road suddenly felt a little more silent. Joe Eli was born into a world shaped by wide skies and strong winds. Raised in Texas, he grew up surrounded by stories, rhythms, and a sense of movement that would later define his music. From an early age, he listened closely to the sounds around him: country tunes on the radio, rock records passed between friends, folk songs that felt old even when they were new music. For Eli, it was never about polish, it was about truth. As a young man, he became part of the growing Austin music scene, a place where rules were bent and borders between genres began to fade. At a time when Nashville leaned toward clean edges and commercial order, Austin offered freedom. Eli fit there naturally. He blended country, rock, and folk without apology, creating songs that felt lived in rather than performed. Those early years were not easy. He played small venues and long nights, often driving himself from town to town. But there was something steady in his work. His songs spoke of movement, longing, and restlessness, but also of belonging. They sounded like Texas itself. By the 1970s, Joe Eli had become a key figure in what came to be known as progressive country. Alongside other artists, he helped reshape what American roots music could be. His albums carried energy and grit, but also reflection. He sang about highways and heartbreak, but also about freedom and responsibility. A fellow musician once said, "Joe didn't chase trends, he chased the song." That approach earned him respect, even when it did not always bring mainstream success. Eli was known for his relentless touring. He believed music lived best in front of people, not just on records. Night after night, he stood on small stages and large ones, delivering performances that felt honest and alive. Fans often said his shows felt like conversations rather than concerts. One longtime listener wrote online, "Joe Eli's music didn't talk at you, it walked beside you." That sense of companionship became part of his legacy. Over the decades, Eli collaborated with a wide range of artists, crossing genres with ease. He valued community over competition, believing that music grew stronger when shared. Younger musicians sought him out not just for his talent, but for his humility. He listened as much as he spoke. Despite his influence, Eli never positioned himself as a star. He lived simply and stayed close to his roots. Texas was not just a theme in his music, it was home. Friends recall that he spoke often about place, about how land and memory shape a person's voice. In his songs, movement was constant. Trains, roads, and restless hearts appeared again and again. Yet there was always a sense of grounding beneath the motion. Eli understood that freedom meant knowing where you came from, even as you kept moving forward. As the music industry changed, Eli remained steady. He did not chase radio formats or online trends. He trusted his instincts and his audience. Albums came when they were ready, not when they were demanded. That patience gave his work a timeless quality. In later years, Eli slowed his pace but never lost his connection to music. He continued to write, reflect, and perform when he could. Fans noticed a deeper calm in his later songs, a sense of acceptance without regret. He had traveled far, and he seemed at peace with the journey. When news of his death in December 2025 became public, tributes flowed in from across the country. Musicians, writers, and fans shared memories rather than statistics. One artist wrote, "Joe Eli taught us that you can be independent and still belong." Another fan posted, "His songs helped me understand where I was from, even when I felt lost." Radio stations across Texas played his music through the night, not as a formal tribute, but as a shared moment. It felt right. His songs had always belonged to the air. Joe Eli's impact cannot be measured by charts alone. It lives in the way he widened the path for artists who came after him. He proved that country music could be open, restless, and honest without losing its soul. He showed that success did not require surrender. More than anything, he reminded listeners that music is a companion. It travels with you. It waits patiently when you need silence and speaks clearly when you do not have the words. As the years pass, Joe Eli's voice will continue to echo from speakers, car radios, and small stages. His songs will still find their way onto long roads and quiet evenings. The road he traveled does not end here. Joe Eli will be remembered as a sound of Texas freedom, a musician who chose truth over comfort, movement over stillness, and heart over polish. Though his voice has fallen silent, the journey he set in motion carries on, one song at a time, forever moving forward. The confirmation came without drama late in the day, as television studios and living rooms across America carried on as usual. Anthony Geary had died in December 2025, and with that quiet news, a familiar presence that had appeared almost daily for decades was suddenly gone for millions of viewers. It felt like losing someone they had grown up with, someone who had always been there. Anthony Geary was born into a world far removed from daytime television fame. From an early age, he showed a deep interest in acting, drawn not to attention, but to character. He studied the craft seriously, believing that even small roles deserved truth. That belief would later reshape an entire genre. When Geary first appeared on General Hospital as Luke Spencer, few could have predicted the impact that would follow. Soap operas at the time were often dismissed as simple or repetitive, but Geary brought something different. He gave Luke emotional depth, humor, pain, and contradiction. The character felt real, flawed, and alive. Viewers responded almost immediately. Luke Spencer was not perfect, and that was the point. He struggled, loved deeply, made mistakes, and carried consequences. Through Geary's performance, daytime television began to feel more human. Stories slowed down, emotions lingered, audiences stayed. A longtime producer once said, "Anthony didn't play scenes, he lived inside them." That approach changed how soap operas were written and performed. As the years passed, Luke Spencer became one of the most recognizable characters in television history. But Geary never treated the role casually. He returned to it again and again, with care, even when the work was demanding. Over more than 40 years, he showed up consistently, honoring the audience's loyalty. For many viewers, General Hospital became part of daily life. It played in kitchens, hospital rooms, and quiet afternoons. Geary's face became familiar in moments of routine and moments of escape. He was present during life's ordinary days, and that created a rare bond. A fan wrote online after his passing, "Anthony Geary wasn't just an actor on my TV, he was part of my day, for most of my life." That sentiment echoed across social media. Behind the scenes, Geary was known as thoughtful and private. He did not seek celebrity in the usual way. He focused on the work. Colleagues recall that he took scripts seriously, often asking questions about motivation and meaning. He believed soap opera storytelling deserved the same respect as any other form. Over time, awards followed, recognition came from both fans and the industry, yet Geary remained grounded. He often spoke about the responsibility that came with being welcomed into people's homes every day. He understood that viewers trusted him with their attention and emotions. One fellow actor shared, "Anthony carried the weight of the show, but he never made it about himself." That quiet leadership helped set a tone that others followed. As television changed and audiences gained more options, Geary's presence remained steady. New shows came and went. Trends shifted, but General Hospital and Luke Spencer within it endured. That endurance was not accidental. It was built on trust, craft, and consistency. In later years, Geary stepped away and returned more than once, each time bringing closure and reflection to the character. These moments felt less like comebacks and more like reunions. Viewers welcomed him back with warmth, grateful for the familiarity. When news of his death spread in December 2025, tributes came from across the television world. Actors, writers, and fans spoke not only of talent, but of presence. One tribute read, "Anthony Geary taught us that daytime television could be deep, brave, and honest." Another viewer wrote, "He made me cry, think, and grow. That's more than entertainment. Simple words, but deeply felt. Anthony Geary's legacy is not limited to one role, but it is defined by it. He showed that long-form storytelling could evolve, that characters could grow alongside audiences, and that emotional truth mattered. Even in daily drama, he helped elevate a genre that had long been underestimated. More importantly, he reminded viewers that consistency itself can be meaningful. Showing up, telling the story, respecting the audience. Over decades, those choices add up. As televisions continue to glow in living rooms, and reruns play for new generations, Anthony Geary's work will remain. His performances will still unfold slowly, day by day, scene by scene, just as they always did. He will be remembered as the face that defined daytime television, a steady presence, a skilled actor, a storyteller who understood that real emotion does not rush and that loyalty, once earned, lasts a lifetime. Though the screen has gone quiet, the memory remains. Anthony Geary lives on in the rhythm of daily stories, in the characters he shaped, and in the hearts of viewers who invited him into their lives, one episode at a time.